The Lantern Man. I was 12 years old when my grandmother told me never to follow the lights in the marsh. "They look like lanterns," she said, her voice crackling like the fire in our hearth. "Warm and welcoming. But they aren't held by people, Charlie. They're held by things that want you to think they're people." My grandmother wasn't the type for fairy tales. She didn't tell me stories about monsters under the bed or bogeymen in closets. She was practical, the kind of woman who could butcher a chicken, stitch a wound, and calculate the taxes all before noon. So when she spoke of the marsh lights with that edge in her voice, I listened. Our town, Millhaven, sat on the edge of the Blackwater Marsh, a sprawling expanse of mud and reeds and brackish water that stretched for miles. During the day, it was just a swamp, teeming with frogs and insects and the occasional heron. But at night, when fog rolled in thick enough to swallow houses whole, the marsh transformed. From my bedroom window, I could sometimes see them, pinpricks of amber light bobbing slowly between the trees. My mother said they were just gas from decaying plants. My father said they were reflections from town. My grandmother said they were hunting. I believed my grandmother. For 3 generations, my family had lived in the same house at the edge of town, built by my great-grandfather with timber hauled from the highlands to the north. It was sturdy, with thick walls and narrow windows, a fortress disguised as a home. The front faced the town with its neat rows of houses and shops. The back faced the marsh. My grandmother lived with us in a room at the end of the upstairs hallway. It had one window that looked out over the water, and every night before bed, she drew the curtains and locked them with a small iron key she kept around her neck. "The lights can't come in unless you invite them," she told me once. "But they're clever. They know how to make you want to invite them." I never asked what she meant by that. Some questions feel dangerous even before you ask them. The summer I turned 13, the rains came harder than anyone could remember. For weeks, water fell from the sky in sheets thick enough to bend light. The river that fed the marsh swelled beyond its banks, and houses on the low side of town had to be evacuated. Our home stayed dry, perched as it was on a slight rise. But the marsh crept closer, swallowing the 100 yards of solid ground that had always separated us from the water. By July, I could throw a stone from our back porch and hear it splash. That's when the dream started. In the first one, I was standing on our back porch. Night had fallen, but the moon was bright enough to silver the landscape. The marsh stretched before me, still and silent. No frogs croaking, no insects buzzing, just the gentle lap of water against the new shoreline. Then a light appeared. Just one, far out in the marsh. It swayed gently, like a lantern carried by an invisible hand. As I watched, it began to move, not randomly, but with purpose, toward me. I should have been afraid, should have run inside, locked the door, hidden under my covers. But in the dream, I wasn't afraid at all. I was curious, fascinated. The light was so warm against the cool blues of the night, so inviting. In the dream, I took a step forward, then another. My bare feet touched water, but I didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. The mud was cold between my toes, but the light ahead was warm, so warm. I woke up standing in my bedroom doorway, my hand on the knob. The house was dark and silent around me. My feet were clean and dry, but my heart hammered in my chest like I'd been running. I didn't tell anyone about the dream, or about the next one, which came the following night, or the one after that. Always the same, the porch, the marsh, the light. Each time I would walk a little further into the water before waking up somewhere in our house. At the top of the stairs, in the kitchen, once with my hand on the back door's deadbolt. After the 5th night, I finally went to my grandmother. She was kneading bread in the kitchen, her gnarled hands working the dough with practiced efficiency despite the arthritis that bent her fingers at uncomfortable angles. I sat at the table and told her everything. The dreams, the sleepwalking, the lights. She didn't look up from her work, but her movement slowed. "It's starting earlier this year," she said, almost to herself. Then louder, "You mustn't follow it, Charlie, no matter how much you want to." "But why would I want to?" I asked. "It's just a light." She stopped kneading then and looked at me directly. Her eyes, normally a soft brown, seemed darker. "Because it knows what you want," she said. "What you need. What would make you walk into that marsh of your own free will?" I felt a chill, despite the summer heat that pressed through the open windows. What does it want from me? My grandmother wiped her hands on her apron, leaving ghostly white prints in the flour. It wants what they always want, a way in. She wouldn't say more than that, just told me to lock my bedroom door at night and keep the key under my pillow, to draw my curtains before sunset and not open them until full morning light, and never ever to look at the marsh if I woke in the night. I followed her rules dutifully for nearly 2 weeks. The dream stopped, or at least, I stopped waking up in strange places around the house. I began to think whatever strange spell had come over me had broken. Then came the message. It was scratched into the mud by our back steps one morning. Just 2 words, written in a shaky hand like someone had used a stick. I found it while taking out the trash. The water had receded a few feet overnight, leaving a strip of exposed mud. The message sat right at the water's edge, the letters deep enough that they hadn't been washed away by the gentle lap of the marsh. I looked out across the water. Nothing moved except a heron, picking its way carefully through the reeds about 20 yards out. No footprints led to or from the message, just those 2 words, appearing as if by magic. I should have told someone, my parents, my grandmother, anyone, but I didn't. Instead, I took the trash can lid and smoothed the mud flat, erasing the message before anyone else could see it. That night, I dreamed again. The light was closer this time, close enough that I could almost make out a shape behind it, a silhouette, black against the glow. A figure that might have been a person. It raised what appeared to be an arm, beckoning. In the dream, I raised my arm too, mirroring it. I woke up on the back porch, the door open behind me, my feet caked in mud up to the ankles. The night was still around me, the marsh a black void beyond our small yard. No lights shone in the distance. If something had been there, it was gone now. I turned to go back inside and froze. There, at the edge of the porch steps, was another message scratched in the mud. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I looked from the message to the marsh and back again. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach as a terrible thought took root. What if it wasn't something trying to lure me in? What if someone out there actually needed help? What if I'd been ignoring them? I erased the message just like the first one and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts chasing each other in circles. What if someone was lost in the marsh? A child from town? A stranded traveler? The water was high, the terrain treacherous. It wouldn't be the first time someone had gotten lost out there. The next morning, I went to the local library. Mrs. Havner, the librarian, knew me well. I was the kind of kid who checked out stacks of books every week. She smiled when I asked for newspaper archives. "School project over the summer?" she asked, leading me to a back room where bound volumes of the sat on metal shelves. "Something like that," I muttered. For hours, I pored over editions from the past 20 years, looking for any mention of people gone missing in the marsh, drownings, accidents, anything that might explain what was happening. I found more than I expected. Every few years, someone would disappear, usually in summer, usually at night. The articles followed a pattern. Initial reports of the missing person, descriptions of search parties combing the marsh. Then, inevitably, a small piece announcing that the search had been called off. No bodies ever recovered. What struck me was the ages, always young. Children or teenagers, between 10 and 16. Just like me. The most recent was a girl named Eliza Corden, 14 years old, missing for 3 days before anyone realized she was gone. Her parents thought she was staying with a friend. The friend thought she'd gone home early. By the time the search began, the trail was cold. That had been 4 years ago, the summer before my family moved to Millhaven. As I was about to close the last volume, a small headline caught my eye. The article was short, tucked away on page 12 of an issue from 12 years earlier. I read the paragraph 3 times, my mouth dry. The Lantern Man. I'd never heard anyone in town mention such a legend, not even as a ghost story told around campfires. But my grandmother knew. She'd warned me about the lights specifically. I flipped through more archives, searching now for any mention of the Lantern Man. I found only fragments, brief references in articles about other topics, a letter to the editor denouncing superstitious nonsense, a paragraph in a feature about local folklore that treated the whole thing as a quaint myth. But 7 children. 7 children gone, or 8, counting Eliza Corden. That night, I confronted my grandmother. She was sitting in her rocking chair by the window, her curtains drawn tight despite the stifling heat of the summer evening. Her fingers worked a piece of embroidery, though her eyes looked tired. "What do you know about the Lantern Man?" I asked without preamble. Her hands stilled. The only sound in the room was the creak of her chair as it rocked slightly forward, then back. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked, her voice careful. "The library. Old newspapers." I sat on the edge of her bed facing her. "Kids have been disappearing in that marsh for decades, and you knew. That's why you warned me about the lights." She set her embroidery aside and sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to contain more than just fatigue. "Every place has its secrets, Charlie. Its wounds that never quite heal." She looked toward the window, though the curtains showed her nothing but her own reflection. "The marsh is hungry, has been since before this town existed." "That doesn't make any sense," I said. "Marshes don't get hungry. They don't lure people in, don't they?" She turned back to me, her face suddenly sharper. "What do you think quicksand is? Nature setting a trap. What about pitcher plants? They look beautiful, smell sweet, all to catch flies." She leaned forward. "The world is full of things that lure and consume. Why not a marsh?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Outside, a chorus of frogs had started up, their croaking creating a pulsing rhythm that filtered through the closed window. "So what is it?" I asked finally. "This Lantern Man?" My grandmother's hands returned to her embroidery, though she didn't look at it. "Some say it's the ghost of the first child who drowned there. Others say it's something older, something that was there before people ever came to this place." She made a small, precise stitch. "I don't think it matters what it is. What matters is what it does." "And what does it do?" She looked up, and in the dim light of her bedside lamp, her eyes seemed unnaturally dark. "It makes a trade," she said simply. "One for another." I felt a chill despite the warm air. "What do you mean?" "The lights appear when it's ready for a new child, but it can't just take. There are rules, even for things like that." Her needle dipped in and out of the fabric with small, practiced movements. "It needs one who's already taken to lead another in. A guide." Slowly, terribly, I began to understand. "You're saying the missing kids are the lights? They're the ones trying to lure others in?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "When I was a girl, my brother Theo followed the lights. He was 10. I was 8. I watched from this very window as he walked into the marsh one night. They found his shoes the next morning, but nothing else." She set her embroidery down again and reached for a small wooden box on her bedside table. 3 years later, the dream started for me. The lights, the voices. She opened the box and removed something small and metallic. A whistle, I realized. Old and tarnished silver, hanging from a thin chain. "My mother gave me this. Said it had been blessed by someone powerful, that the sound it makes hurts the spirits." She held it out to me. "I've carried it for 62 years, never needed to use it." I took the whistle. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, the silver warm from being kept close to her body. "Theo would have been 73 this year," she said softly. "But in my dreams, he's always 10, always calling me to join him in the marsh, even now." That night, I slept with the whistle around my neck and my door locked. But locks, as I was starting to understand, meant little against what lived in the marsh. The dream came again. The porch, the water, the light. But this time, as the figure raised its arm to beckon me, I could see more clearly. Not a full face, but enough. A girl, young, her hair long and dark where it wasn't plastered to her head with water. Her clothes sodden, dripping endlessly, though she stood perfectly still. She smiled, not a normal smile, too wide, too fixed, like someone had taught her the shape of happiness, but not the feeling. "Help me," she said, though her lips didn't move. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I'm lost. In the dream, I found myself stepping forward. The water was cold around my ankles, then my calves as I moved deeper. Who are you? I called out. Eliza, the voice replied. I'm Eliza. I'm drowning. The name hit me like a physical blow. Eliza Corden, the girl who disappeared 4 years ago, the most recent victim of the marsh. You're not drowning, I said, my voice shaking even in the dream. You're already gone. The figure's smile didn't change, but something in the air around us shifted. The light she held flickered, just once. I'm alone, she said. So alone. Come keep me company. I took another step forward without meaning to, like my body was responding to commands I hadn't given. The water reached my knees now, soaking the hem of my pajama pants. Just a little closer, Eliza said. Then we'll both be free. My hand moved to my throat, where the silver whistle hung. In the dream, I could feel its weight, its solidity. Something real in a landscape that increasingly felt anything but. Behind Eliza, I saw movement in the dark water. More lights, dimmer but growing brighter. More figures taking shape. A boy with a gap-toothed smile. A girl with pigtails. Others less distinct but all young. All watching. All waiting. All drowning forever. I raised the whistle to my lips and blew. No sound came out, at least none that I could hear. But the effect was immediate. The figures in the water convulsed as if struck. The lights they held flickered violently, and the water around them began to churn and bubble like a pot set to boil. Eliza's face contorted, her too wide smile twisting into something animal and furious. She lunged forward, her movements suddenly jerky and wrong, like a puppet with half its strings cut. I blew the whistle again, backing away even as my lungs began to burn from the effort. The water seemed to rise up around the figures, swirling faster, higher, until it formed a kind of wall between us. Through it, I could see them thrashing, reaching, their lights growing dimmer. Then, the wall of water collapsed, and they were gone. The marsh was still. Silent. No lights, no figures. Just dark water stretching into blackness. I woke up on the back porch. The whistle clutched so tightly in my hand that it had left an imprint on my palm. My feet were dry. The marsh was quiet except for the normal sounds of frogs and insects. Dawn was just beginning to break, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. For a moment, I thought it had just been a dream, a vivid nightmare brought on by too many ghost stories and old newspaper articles. Then I looked down at the mud by the steps. Words, dozens of them, scratched hastily and unevenly into the soft earth, overlapping in places where space had run out. The words continued, growing more frantic and jumbled until they were just jagged lines scored deep into the mud. At the very edge of the water, one final message stood apart from the rest, written in a steadier hand. I ran inside and woke my grandmother. She came downstairs in her robe, leaning heavily on the banister, and stood on the porch beside me. When she saw the messages, she didn't look surprised, just tired. "It's angry," she said. "That's good. Means you won." "Won what?" "Your life." She put a hand on my shoulder. "For now, at least." We erased the messages together, using a garden hose to wash away all traces before my parents woke up. As the water smoothed the mud flat again, my grandmother told me more about the marsh, about the pattern she'd noticed over the years, how the disappearances seemed to come in cycles, one child gone, then a few years of quiet before another would vanish. "It needs a guide," she explained, "someone who's already part of the marsh to lead others in. But I think there's a time limit. If the guide doesn't bring someone new, it loses its power. Has to wait for the next victim to die naturally in the water." So, Eliza, her time was running out. She needed to bring you in before she faded. The logic of it was terrible, but made a kind of sense. A horrible, cyclical hunger that fed itself. One child to lure the next. On and on through years, decades, perhaps centuries. "Will it come back for me?" I asked. My grandmother looked out over the marsh, now golden in the early morning light. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it will find someone else, someone without a whistle." She gave my shoulder a final squeeze. Keep it with you, always. For the rest of that summer, I kept the whistle on a chain around my neck. I didn't take it off to shower, didn't remove it to sleep. It became a part of me, a small, solid reminder that some dangers can't be seen until they're right in front of you. The dreams stopped. The marsh receded as the rains finally ended, returning to its normal boundaries. Life resumed its predictable rhythm. School started. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, I began to relax. That winter, a new family moved into town. The Harrises. They had a daughter my age named Maya. She was smart and funny, with a quick smile and a talent for drawing. We became friends almost immediately, bonding over a shared love of fantasy novels and a mutual dislike of our school's vice principal. Maya's family had rented a house on the other side of town, far from the marsh. But as spring arrived and the days grew longer, we would sometimes ride our bikes to the edge of the water. I never went close, not anymore, but Maya was fascinated by it. By the birds and the plants and the way the light played across the surface in the late afternoon. "It's so beautiful," she said one day as we sat on a hill overlooking the marsh. "Mysterious." I fingered the whistle beneath my shirt, its weight a comfort. "It's dangerous," I said. "People have drowned." Maya laughed. "Don't be so dramatic, it's just a swamp." But it wasn't. And deep down, I think she knew that. There was something in the way she looked at it, not just curiosity, but recognition. Like she was seeing something familiar in a place she'd never been before. I should have paid more attention to that look. Should have seen the warning signs. Because that April, just as the first spring peepers began their nightly chorus, Maya disappeared. Her parents called mine in a panic around midnight. Maya had gone to bed at 10 but wasn't in her room when her mother checked on her at 11:30. The window was open, no sign of struggle, just gone. I knew immediately. Even before the search parties formed, before the police came with their questions and concerned expressions, I knew where she had gone. What had called her? I waited until my house was quiet. My parents had joined the search, combing the town in widening circles with flashlights and desperate hope. My grandmother slept, her breathing heavy with age and medication. I took my flashlight, a jacket, and the silver whistle that had saved me once before. The marsh was different at night, the friendly green of daylight replaced by bottomless black. The water eerily still except where night creatures broke the surface. No lights shone except the distant windows of houses and the cold glitter of stars. I stood at the edge, my heart hammering in my chest, and called her name. "Maya!" Nothing answered but the wind in the reeds. I tried again, louder. "Maya!" This time, something shifted in the darkness. A faint glow, far out in the marsh. Barely visible at first, then steadily brighter. A warm amber light like a candle shielded from the wind. It wasn't moving toward me. It stayed in place, swaying gently as if held by an invisible hand. Waiting. I knew what it was. What I should do was turn around, go home, tell the adults what I suspected. But by then, Maya would be gone. Another name in old newspaper archives. Another light in the marsh. I took a deep breath and stepped into the water. It was cold. Colder than it had any right to be in April. The mud sucked at my shoes, trying to pull them off with each step. I kept the flashlight beam trained on the light ahead, which grew steadily brighter as I approached. The reeds parted around me, some bending naturally, others seeming to withdraw as if making way. "Maya?" I called again, softer now that I was closer. "Is that you?" The light flickered, but didn't answer. I pushed forward, the water now at my knees. My jeans grew heavy, clinging to my legs like desperate hands. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I kept moving. One step, another. The mud grew softer, less stable. Twice I nearly lost my balance, catching myself just before falling face first into the black water. The light was close now, close enough that I could make out a silhouette behind it. Small, human-shaped. It stood perfectly still in water that should have been over its head. The light held out like an offering. As I drew nearer, details emerged. Long hair, a familiar profile, the outline of the jacket she'd been wearing when I last saw her. "Maya," I said, relief flooding through me. "You're okay. We need to go back." She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, the light casting strange shadows across the surface of the water. I was only about 10 feet away when I noticed the second light, fainter, further back in the reeds, a dim glow that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, then a third, a fourth, more, appearing one by one until they formed a semicircle behind Maya. None as bright as hers, but all steady, all watching. I stopped. Something was wrong. Maya's posture was too stiff, her head tilted at an odd angle. And the water, it should have been up to her chest at least, but it only reached her waist, as if she were standing on something beneath the surface. Or floating. "Maya?" My voice cracked. Slowly, so slowly it barely registered as movement at first, she turned to face me. The light she held illuminated her features from below, casting harsh shadows that distorted her familiar face into something alien. Her eyes reflected the light like an animal's, twin points of amber fire that contained no recognition, no humanity. But worst of all was her smile, too wide, too fixed. A perfect crescent that stretched her lips to breaking point but never touched her eyes. Not Maya. Not anymore. "Charlie," she said, though her lips didn't move. The voice seemed to come from the water itself, rising up around me like bubbles breaking the surface. "You came." I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing in the soft mud. "What happened to you?" "I followed the lights," she said, her voice still disconnected from her mouth. "They were so beautiful, so warm. They said they needed me." Around her, the other lights drew closer. Their bearers became more distinct, children of different ages, different times. Their clothes belonged to different eras. A boy in knickerbockers and a cap, a girl in a dress that might have been fashionable 40 years ago, others in more modern attire, all of them watching with the same reflective eyes, all smiling, the same wrong smile. Among them, I recognized Eliza from my dreams. Her light was dimmer now, her form less substantial. She lingered at the back of the group, flickering like a candle about to go out. "We're hungry," Maya said. "So hungry, and you're perfect." They began to move toward me in unison, not walking. The water didn't splash or ripple around them. They glided, as if suspended just above the surface. Their lights grew brighter, almost painful to look at directly. My hand found the whistle at my throat. I raised it to my lips with fingers numbed by cold and fear. But before I could blow, Maya's hand shot out, impossibly fast, impossibly far, and grabbed my wrist. Her touch was like ice, burning cold against my skin. Her fingers didn't feel like fingers at all, but like something trying to remember the shape of them. "No," she said, and for the first time, her lips moved with the word. They peeled back to reveal teeth that gleamed too white in the lantern light. "Not this time." I struggled, trying to pull away, but her grip was like iron. The other children moved closer, closing the circle around me. Their lights blended together, creating a wall of harsh brightness that made my eyes water. "Join us," they whispered in terrible unison. "Be with us. Forever." Maya's grip tightened until I felt bones grind together. The whistle slipped from my nerveless fingers, falling toward the water in what felt like slow motion. I lunged for it, but Maya yanked me back, her strength inhuman. The whistle hit the surface with a small splash and immediately began to sink. "No!" I screamed, throwing myself forward with all my weight. Maya's grip broke, not because I was stronger, but because she let go, confident in her victory. I plunged face first into the water. It was black and cold and tasted of rot. My hands groped blindly in the mud, searching for the whistle. The children's lights shone from above, distorted by the water into fractured beams that illuminated nothing useful. My lungs began to burn. My fingers scraped through silt and decaying plants. Nothing. Nothing. Then, a flash of silver just to my left. I lunged for it, fingers closing around smooth metal just as something grabbed my ankle. I kicked hard, feeling my foot connect with something solid. The grip loosened just enough for me to push up, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. The whistle was clutched in my fist, covered in mud, but intact. Around me, the children had drawn even closer. Their faces were no longer even attempting to look human. The skin stretched too tight over impossible angles. The eyes too large, too bright. The mouths now just black holes in masks of flesh. I didn't hesitate. I raised the whistle to my lips and blew with every ounce of breath in my lungs. Again, I heard nothing, but the effect was immediate and violent. The children recoiled as if physically struck. Their lights flickered wildly, some going out entirely before flaring back to life. They let out a sound, not screams, but something older and more terrible. The sound of something that had forgotten how to be human, but remembered how to feel pain. I blew again and again. Each blast seemed to weaken them further. Their forms grew less distinct, their lights dimmer. The water around them began to churn, not from wind or current, but from something deeper, something angry. Maya was the last to fade. Her form held together longer than the others, her light burning stubbornly bright even as the rest began to disappear. She looked at me with eyes that were no longer eyes but windows into something ancient and hungry. "We would have kept you safe," she said, her voice now coming from her mouth but sounding nothing like Maya. It was older, deeper, a chorus of voices layered over one another. "Safe with us. Forever." I blew the whistle one final time. The sound I couldn't hear seemed to tear through reality itself. The water exploded around Maya in a geyser of mud and reeds. Her light sputtered, flared blindingly bright for one terrible moment, then winked out like a candle in a storm. When my vision cleared, the marsh was empty. No lights, no children, just the natural darkness of night, broken only by the beam of my flashlight where it had fallen onto a patch of reeds. I waded back to shore, each step a struggle through mud that seemed determined to keep me. My clothes were soaked, my skin numb with cold, but I was alive. I had escaped. Again. They found Maya's body the next morning, caught in the reeds not far from where I had seen her last. The official cause of death was drowning. The police concluded she must have sleepwalked into the marsh during the night. A tragic accident, they said. Nothing more. I knew better, but I told no one what I had seen. Not my parents, not my grandmother, not even Maya's family, who deserved the truth more than anyone. Because what truth could I offer that wouldn't sound like madness? That their daughter had become something else? That she had tried to feed me to the marsh? That she might still be out there, a light in the water, waiting for someone new to follow? My grandmother passed away that winter. In her will, she left me the silver whistle and a letter. It was short, just a few lines written in her shaky hand. "I'm 37 now. I've lived in 6 different cities, none of them near marshes or swamps or any standing water larger than a swimming pool. I keep the whistle on a chain around my neck. I haven't used it in 24 years. But sometimes, on rainy nights when the wind howls just right, I dream of water, of lights in the distance, bobbing gently, beckoning. And among them, 2 that burn brighter than the rest. One held by a girl with long dark hair whose art I once admired. The other by a boy who looks exactly like me at 13, with a smile that stretches too wide and eyes that reflect like an animal's in the dark. And I wonder, did I really escape that night? Or did part of me stay behind, trapped in the marsh, waiting for someone to follow the light? I guess I'll know soon enough. My daughter turned 12 last month. And last night, as I checked on her before bed, I noticed her staring out her window into the darkness of our backyard. When I asked what she was looking at, she turned to me with a puzzled expression. "I thought I saw a light," she said. "Like a lantern." Tomorrow, I'll give her the whistle. And I'll tell her everything. Because the marsh is patient. But so am I. Don't blink twice. I was 16 the first time I noticed her. At least, I think that's when it started. I can't be sure anymore. Memory has a way of softening the edges around what really matters. But what I do know is this. She only comes closer when I blink twice. Not in general, not casually, but in succession. 2 blinks, back to back, click, click like a shutter, and she inches closer. The first time it happened, I thought I was seeing things. I was walking home from school, cutting through the lot behind the old veterinary clinic. A shortcut I'd taken 100 times before. There was no one else around. The sky was that thick gray that makes it hard to tell what time it is, and I remember rubbing my eyes because the wind had blown dust into them. I blinked twice, fast, and there she was. A woman, about 30 yards down the alley, dressed like she belonged to another decade, maybe the 50s. Faded floral dress, shoes scuffed like she'd worn them through a war. Her head was tilted too far to one side and her arms hung like dead weight. I looked away, rubbed my eyes again. When I looked back, she was gone. I didn't think anything of it. I told myself it was a hallucination, maybe lightheadedness, maybe a trick of the eye. But she came again, and every time I blinked twice, only twice in a row, she moved closer. It took me years to understand the pattern. At first, I thought it was stress, then a haunting, then mental illness, but it was none of those things. It was a rule. A law of physics written just for me. She never appeared in crowds, never while I was driving, only when I was alone. Sometimes I'd forget. 2 accidental blinks while watching TV or scrolling on my phone. Then I'd glance toward the doorway, and there she'd be, in the hall, just past the light, her mouth slack, her fingers twitching like she was testing how to use them. It never mattered how fast I looked away. Once I blinked, she moved. 1 blink? Nothing. 2? Closer. When I was 19, I tried to trick it. I recorded myself blinking twice on a webcam, then watched the footage over and over. Nothing happened. But the next morning, I woke up and found her crouched beside my bed, close enough to touch. Her eyes open so wide I thought they'd split, her lips twitching, like she was trying to remember how to smile. That's when I realized, watching didn't count. I had to blink. I started wearing goggles at night, wrapped elastic around my head to keep my lids open. It didn't help. I still blinked. You don't know how much your body fights you until you try to stop blinking in the dark for hours at a time. And every time I slipped up, every time exhaustion dragged me into that lazy click, click, she moved. I once caught her halfway through my bathroom mirror. Not a reflection. Inside the mirror, her palms pressed against the glass, her face fogging it as she breathed. Her teeth chattered, even though her mouth didn't move. I tried telling my sister. I told her I was being followed, but I didn't explain. Just said that something was getting closer, that I couldn't sleep, that I was scared. She thought it was drugs, or trauma, something. She told our mom. They had a talk, the kind you have when someone's unraveling. She offered to get me help. But that same night, she fell asleep on the couch with a movie playing. A scary one. I remember it because there was a strobe light scene, flickering light, eyes wide, fast-paced tension, and just before I turned the TV off, I looked at her. She blinked twice, and then she shivered, sat bolt upright, and started to cry. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "I think something's watching me." She didn't believe me, but she stopped falling asleep with the TV on. I never saw the woman again in my sister's eyes, but sometimes when we were talking and she blinked twice out of habit, I'd see her flinch. By the time I was 24, I had lost everything. Friendships? Gone. You can't keep close relationships when you're terrified of something no one else can see. Jobs? I couldn't work in an office, couldn't stare at screens, couldn't trust myself to even daydream because sometimes you blink twice when you're thinking. Dating was out of the question. I tried once with a girl named Amber who had this laugh like shattered glass, sharp, fast, impossible to ignore. She liked horror movies, said she wanted to date someone with an edge. We watched something together, something gory and dumb, and during a jump scare, I blinked twice. She didn't see it, but I did. The woman, sitting beside us on the couch, just for a second. And then she was gone again, waiting in the dark like a reset trap. I told Amber I was sick. She left early. We never talked again. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just kept blinking, over and over. Click, click, click. Would she come faster? Would she move in bursts, like a stop-motion figure animated just for me? Would she lunge, or would she just appear inside me without warning? I've come close to testing it, but something always stops me. I think part of me still hopes there's a way to stop it. Some loophole, some ritual, something I haven't tried yet. But she's so close now. Last night, I caught her reflection in my eye. I wasn't looking at anything, just brushing my teeth, staring at the wall, thinking. I blinked, once, then again. And I felt it, a tightness in my throat. Not pressure, Not fear, presence. I turned toward the mirror and saw her. Not in the mirror, in my eyes. She was behind them. I don't think she's chasing me anymore. I think she's learning me. Like a parasite that doesn't want to kill the host. Just become it. And the worst part? I've started blinking twice in my dreams. I tried taping my eyes open last night. Actual duct tape. It worked, sort of. I woke up unable to see. Dried tears had crusted the edges of my vision. But she wasn't closer. That was the first time I've slept in weeks. I'm writing this now because something has changed. She's no longer waiting for blinks. She's flickering in and out of view now. No rules, no rhythm, just presence. Like she's rewriting the deal. She appeared in the fridge light this morning, arms tucked behind the milk, smiling. She stood behind me on the bus, her fingers resting on the pole. She waved at me through the window of a locked car I passed on my walk. She isn't following the pattern anymore, and I think it's because I broke it. I blinked too many times. I weakened the boundary. I'm scared that soon. I'll blink and she won't just be closer, she'll be me. If you're reading this and you ever feel like something's watching you when you close your eyes, don't blink, especially not twice. The signal. I first noticed it on Tuesday night, a faint buzzing from the power lines outside my bedroom window, just enough to keep me from falling asleep. By Wednesday morning, everyone in town was talking about the noise, a persistent hum that seemed to follow you inside your home, no matter where you went. Some people described it as more of a high-pitched whine. Others swore it was a deep, resonant throb. But we all agreed on one thing. It had started at exactly the same time. 3:17 a.m. Tuesday. The town council called an emergency meeting that evening. I walked the 3 blocks to the community center, past houses with all their curtains drawn despite the summer heat. Mrs. Patel from next door hurried past me without a word of greeting, her hands clamped firmly over her ears. The community center was packed. Mayor Collins stood at the podium, looking haggard. "We've contacted the power company," he announced. "They claim there's nothing wrong with the grid. We've also reached out to nearby military installations, all factories within a 50-mile radius. No one's claiming responsibility for this disturbance." Shouts and questions erupted from the crowd. "My kid hasn't slept in 2 days. It's giving me migraines. What about the people who disappeared?" The room fell silent at that last question. Mayor Collins cleared his throat. "We have no confirmed disappearances at this time," he said carefully. A woman stood up in the back. I recognized her as Lisa Duncan, who ran the pharmacy. "My husband went to check our circuit breaker when the noise started. He never came back up from the basement. That was 2 days ago." Others began to speak up. "My neighbor went into his cellar to get some tools to wrap his windows in soundproofing. No one's seen him since. My mother went downstairs to do laundry yesterday morning. When I went to check on her, there was just an empty laundry basket at the bottom of the stairs. I felt a chill run through me. I lived in one of the few houses in town without a basement or cellar. Just a concrete slab foundation, which had been a disappointment when I bought the place 3 years ago. Now it seemed like a blessing. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Mayor Collins promised action, but you could tell from his face he had no idea what to do. The police chief announced a curfew and advised everyone to stay on the ground floor or above in their homes. I walked home in the fading twilight, the buzzing growing louder as darkness fell. I swore I could feel it in my fillings. As I rounded the corner onto my street, my phone vibrated with a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "It's coming from below. Don't trust what they tell you. Meet me at the old fire tower at midnight. Come alone." I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. I hesitated, then typed back. "Who is this?" The reply came immediately. "Someone who knows what's happening. The noise isn't just noise, it's a signal." That night, against all better judgment, I drove out to the abandoned fire tower at the edge of the state forest. The buzzing was quieter out here, almost imperceptible. A figure waited at the base of the tower. Dr. Hannigan, the town's oldest physician, retired for at least a decade. He motioned me to follow him up the rusted metal stairs. "I've been tracking the pattern," he said as we climbed. "It's not random, it's a sequence, repeating every 76 minutes. At the top of the tower, he had set up what looked like old ham radio equipment and several laptops. "Listen," he said, putting headphones over my ears. The buzzing was there, but transformed through his equipment. It wasn't noise anymore. It was a pattern, a rhythm. Almost like Morse code? I asked, removing the headphones. Something like that, but older, much older. Dr. Hannigan's eyes gleamed in the dim light from his computer screens. "I've been studying the caves under this region for 40 years. There's something down there that's been sleeping for a very long time. Until now." He showed me geological surveys, newspaper clippings about strange disappearances dating back to the 1800s, and his own translations of the signal. "It's waking up, and it's hungry. The signal is calling people down. Those who hear it clearly enough feel compelled to go below ground, and when they do, they don't come back," I finished. He nodded grimly. "The authorities won't listen. I've tried. They think it's mass hysteria or some kind of gas leak causing hallucinations." "What can we do?" "There's a pattern to who it affects most strongly. People who've lived here their whole lives seem most susceptible. Newcomers less so. You've only been here, what, 3 years? That's why you can resist it." I nodded, though the buzzing had been growing louder in my head hourly. "I need your help," he continued. "The source is under the old mill. We need to go there and—" His words were cut off by a deafening crack. The tower shuddered beneath us. Metal groaned and twisted. "They know we're here," he whispered, eyes wide with terror. The tower began to tilt. Through the floor grating, I could see the ground below us, moving, writhing, as if the earth itself was alive and angry. Dr. Hannigan thrust a flash drive into my hand. "Everything I know is on here. You have to get the word out. Tell people to leave town. Tell them to—" The floor gave way beneath him. I lunged for his hand but missed. His scream was swallowed by the night as he plummeted into the darkness below. I scrambled down what remained of the stairs, the tower collapsing behind me. I ran to my car and drove, tires squealing on the dirt road. In my rearview mirror, I saw something impossible. The entire fire tower was being pulled into the ground, like a straw into a mouth. I drove straight through the night, not stopping until I was 3 states away. Found a motel with decent Wi-Fi and plugged in the flash drive. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The signal wasn't calling people down. It was calling something up. Dr. Hannigan had decoded enough to understand that much. Whatever slept beneath our town had been dormant for centuries, slowly extending its roots, its influence, throughout the region. The power lines, the cell towers, the fiber optic cables, they had all become part of its nervous system. The buzzing was its thoughts, leaking into our world as it stirred toward wakefulness. That was 3 days ago. The news reports are calling it a sinkhole tragedy. An entire town simply collapsing in on itself. Geological anomaly, they say. Underwater caverns, erosion, mining operations from the previous century. But I know the truth. I can still hear the buzzing, even here, hundreds of miles away. It's fainter now, but persistent, like it's searching for me. Last night I got another text from that same unknown number. "You can't run from the signal. We all hear it eventually." I've been on the move ever since, but it's getting harder to think clearly. The buzzing is in my head now, not just my ears. Sometimes I catch myself walking towards stairwells in buildings or eyeing storm drains on the street with an inexplicable longing. If you're reading this, please understand. It's spreading. The signal is spreading. And whatever you do, don't go below ground. Don't listen when it calls you home.